Hi.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Sara Ines Calderon,
and I'm Adriana
and
Maestas.
thank you so much for joining us another week for our Latino Politics Roundup. I think this week, probably some of the biggest news that was coming out was the fiscal cliff. I know I was in DC recently, and
hmm
everybody was talking about, oh, I'm working on the fiscal cliff this, I'm working on the fiscal cliff that.
Yeah, what's going to happen when we go over the cliff?
I know. So, which we had a really great story this week in Politics 365 by Iris Estrada, who went over kind of more in detail how specifically Latinos and Latino families are going to be affected if this, fiscal cliff showdown doesn't go in favor, I guess, of the Obama administration and the Democrats specifically. I guess, like, the crux of the issue continues to be whether or not the Bush tax cuts
hmm
and are going to expire or not, and whether or not taxes are going to be raised on the wealthy versus cutting, social programs. So I guess there was an interesting. The White House had a conference call with the National Council of La Raza, and we got some interesting information out of that. Specifically, that an average Latino family earning $43,000 a year, we're talking a family, would see a $2,200 tax hike, according to their information. And Cecilia Munoz, White House Director of Domestic Policy, said that 99% of Latino families would be affected if the, the tax, I guess the tax hikes don't go through. So that was pretty interesting. And again, the thing to keep in mind here as we're talking about, Latinos specifically being affected with the fiscal cliff stuff is that we have a higher unemployment rate than the general population. So Latinos have a 10% unemployment rate already. So
hmm
when we're talking about fiscal cliff issues, it's a little bit more salient for that reason as well.
Yeah, and the other thing I think to keep in mind with the fiscal cliff is I think that the media has hyped this up to
Mm-hmm.
be a bigger deal than it is. But that's not to say, I mean, it's definitely going to impact families, especially people who are W 2 wage earners. Like you said, people
Mm-hmm.
who are, you know, essentially the 99%.
Definitely.
But some people, I think that, I mean, to keep in mind really is that the payroll taxes will go up if this isn't resolved. And basically, what the Republicans in the House want to do is extend the Bush tax cuts permanently. So, I mean, again, we're kind of in the situation where it's, do you give a tax cut to the lower incomes, or do you sort of keep permanent this nice tax cut for the
For the
upper,
wealthy.
yeah, for the wealthy, and um, and so that's sort of the heart of the debate.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, but yeah, so we'll see how that turns out. I mean, obviously they're going to have to go for it or not sometime
Mm-hmm.
here real soon. So, but there was some other interesting stuff that happened this week in Latino
Definitely.
politics.
Um, Here in California at Cal Berkeley, the flagship UC school, they received a $1 million gift from the Haas Fund, which is to supplement state aid for undocumented youth. So this is going to benefit California Dream Act students at Cal Berkeley. This is considered, I think, the single largest gift for students,
Wow.
undocumented students ever. This is an article we have on Politic 365 as well. It's titled Cal Berkeley Assists Dream Act Eligible Students. And the other thing to keep in mind is are only about 200 undocumented youth at Cal Berkeley. So I mean, it's definitely a help to them, but it's not. We're talking about a real small sliver of the student population there. Um, so that's what's going on. The other thing to keep in mind too is California Dream Act, which will allow undocumented youth in the state to apply for Cal grants, will also go into effect on January 1st, 2013,
That's right.
in just a few
Mm-hmm.
weeks. So,
That's exciting.
yeah, that's what this augments. And sort of to kind of dovetail with the Dream Act, an intern for Senator Menendez was arrested by ICE this week. Or actually, I think it was the week before, but this week it made the press. And we have a little article on Politic 365 about that as well, titled Intern for Senator Menendez Detained by ICE. So basically, this was an unpaid 18-year-old intern who had an issue with some sort of sexual assault or something that required him to register as a sex offender. And what he did in the case has not been opened because he was a minor when he committed this crime. So apparently, the young man, his name is Sanchez, he applied for deferred action, and his file was flagged because you cannot have a criminal offense and receive deferred action. So in essence, sort of the process worked, but it also provided an opportunity for Senator Menendez. He issued a statement earlier in the week talking about why this is a need for comprehensive immigration reform, because even with an unpaid intern, you can't really go through all the channels to determine whether they can work and what their situation is and whether they've gone through background checks or not. And I think that a lot of people, we know that if you've ever worked in an intern situation, they don't invest that kind of energy into your application.
And I mean, especially if we're talking about people who are undocumented in the sense that they don't have documentation. And so I think that's kind of sounds like what he was trying to say. It's like, isn't it better to bring people into the fold so we have better information, not just for these particular things, but in general?
Yeah.
If we know what we're dealing with, then we can deal with it better.
Definitely. He did a good job of sort of explaining what happened in his office with that. And of course, the student is not working there no more. So.
Yeah. Wow. Well, obviously it's the holiday season, so it's pretty slow, but I just want to take this moment to remind you that if you want to tweet us tips or send us tips, you can tweet me. I'm at Sara Chica D.
I'm Latino Politics.
And we always love to hear your comments. Please like this video. Please favorite it. Please share it on Facebook. Please tell your friends about it. Subscribe to our channel, because we definitely want this to be as exhaustive a show as possible. So moving west from New Jersey to Texas, there's some interesting things happening in Texas right now. First of all, Dallas, there was an interesting story that we ran on Politic 365 this week about the Dallas City Council redistricting. Currently, there's only 3 Latinos on the City Council. I guess there's 14 seats total. And you have to keep in mind, Dallas is a very Latino city, and it's actually been growing like crazy as far as Latino population goes in the recent past. So the fact that there's only 3 Latinos on the Dallas City Council is a historical, let's say, a remnant that definitely needs to be remedied. So check that story out. We'll put it in the references in the description box. But that's really interesting, because I think it's indicative of where Texas is in this moment of change. There's all this demographic change, but that hasn't necessarily translated into political empowerment for Latinos in the state. So that'll be really interesting. Another thing that's really cool, and this was something that was actually like creating a lot of ire. I mean, I think people were thinking that Rick Perry was like purposely trying to mess with the Latinos in Houston specifically, because he had not taken action on this, and they were afraid that he was going to turn it into some sort of vendetta or like a political weapon, because Senator Mario Gallego was posthumously elected in November, so we had there was nobody to fill that seat, because obviously he died before the election. But Rick Perry hadn't set a special election date, and that's one of the powers that the governors in Texas have, is to do stuff like that. So he finally did set an election date, though. It's going to be January 26th. Candidates have until the 27th to file, and there's already kind of like a contentious, battle between the candidates who are trying to fill the seat. So it's going to be really interesting race to watch, the Senate District 6 in the Houston area. So, but that was kind of what we had there. But obviously, the biggest story of the week we can't ignore was the shooting. So obviously that's a tragedy, and there's only so much that you can say about it, other than that's just senseless and terrible and unfortunate. And I think now in the aftermath that we're all, all of us, I mean, folks like ourselves, reporters, and normal folks, I've seen all kinds of stuff on Facebook, but even politicians are trying to make sense of it. And something that I've seen is that now there's this idea of, well, is gun control going to be an issue now in Barack Obama's second term in office? Is that going to push over immigration reform? Is, gun control going to dominate before we can get to the immigration reform issue? Or can we even get to the immigration reform issue? I mean, that's something else that we were talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think with the gun control is the case is going to be made that it applies to, even though we know that like immigration isn't sort of perceived as an international issue. Gun control is definitely something that's domestic, and now too, that with having children who are being shot at and people in malls being shot at, it is something that I think is a lot more salient to the general population. So we're definitely going to see something about gun control. I want to say today, even Senator Feinstein says that she wants to introduce an assault weapons ban bill, like on the first day of the new Congress, supposedly. So that is coming up. I think that's going to be an epic battle. On the policy side, I think it's going to be interesting to see how the different cases are made, because it seems that there is a little bit more momentum now for gun control, and President Obama really hasn't implemented any gun control in his first term, despite a lot of these warnings that he was going to do it.
Exactly.
And he never really did. He even repealed some gun policies.
Exactly.
So I think that, I don't know if it's going to bump immigration from the agenda, but I think that it might take a lot of media resources and definitely, resources up in DC for people who want to see something happen with gun control.
Yeah, I think that's probably a really good analysis, what's going to happen. I think there's just been the immigration reform issue has just been so, just repressed. I would say repressed, for so long that, now finally at least with the deferred action, we've kind of taken one step forward. And I think that there's so much support momentum behind that. It's going to be very difficult to kind of shut it down completely. But that's why we and you and everybody needs to continue to be involved. Whether it's talking about immigration reform with your, congressman or, your friends or whoever, but we definitely need to focus on that because it's going to be easy, especially with, like you said, little children getting shot. It's going to be hard to, compete with that kind of imagery in the mass media unless we're all making a concerted effort to keep this as a salient issue. So
yeah, definitely. It's tragic, but I think, it definitely is going to cap the whole shootings, and also too, if there are any copycat shootings, that seems to sort of be a pattern that we see. Where there's like a mass shooting and then something else very similar happens in another region. Definitely. Because I don't know, crazy people get inspired, I guess.
I guess they get inspired too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for sticking with us another week. And like I said, please subscribe to our channel, share this video on Facebook,
send us tips.
Send us tips, comment. Definitely, we're in kind of like the lull in political news. So if you were involved with the campaign, or you're a candidate, or you'd like to be on our show, definitely tweet us. I'm Sara Chica D.
I'm Latino Politics.
And we'll see you again soon.
All right, goodbye.